A leap of faith. Find. Add to drive. More options. A leap of faith. SGM, the 14th of October 2021. The title of this article would suggest the topics covered within would be of a spiritual nature. They are not. Hard science, theoretical physics, cosmology. Sorry. In science, if you spend long enough time in that domain, leaps of faith can be quite commonplace. This article, essentially on theoretical cosmology, will evince that statement. In previous articles on cosmology, I wrote about a QFT boson called the elaston. Its antithesis. Boson would be the time reversal version of that, the rigidon. But time after time, I have had to discard conventional notions because adhering to them obfuscates genuine understanding for me. Yet again I find myself in this position. I'm referring to the notion that the elaston is a purely temporal boson that exclusively operates in that domain. In that case, I refer to it as an acceleron, with its antithesis being the retardon. It has taken me literally months to get to this intellectual position. As I mature as a scientist, I'm progressively becoming more conservative in my scientific thought processes. As I have developed elaston cosmology, this has occurred. For instance, I know all too well that physicists conventionally reject the notion of the impedance of space, and historically why they do so. Because of that, I entertain the possibility in my scientific mental meanderings that impedance may actually be associated exclusively with the temporal domain as I have determined elasticity to be. This whole discussion arose when I revisited elastons and considered the ways to generate them. 0. Via convex spaces during inflation. 1. Via antimatter, the proximity thereof. But further considering relativistic particles forced me to reframe above in terms of accelerons and retardants. Matter and relativistic particles must generate retardant fields. Antimatter and relativistic antiparticles must generate accelerant fields. The retardant plays the role of the graviton, while accelerons, well, they would fulfill exactly the same function, role for antimatter if it was abundant. But because the Big Bang must have been a balanced curvature event, there must have been a tremendous initial generation of accelerants to balance the retardants generated by embryonic matter. Here, in this revised acceleron replacing elaston framework, it all comes down to the temporal field. Particles, bosons, the retardant and acceleron. In a previous article, I offered a test of the framework at an appropriate facility like the LHC in Geneva. Maintain an antiproton beam for a sufficient period for 5 sigma resolution of confidence. On the hypothesis that the beam should alter time proximal to the beam depending on beam density, proximity to the beam, and experiment duration. There could be 2 comparison checks, 1 sensor clock near a proton beam and 1 clock far away from both. If I can evaluate this revised framework for a sufficient period, it may turn out we don't need impedance any further theoretically. This whole framework initially was conceived considering impedance of space as a central factor for elementary particles relating spin and charge, circa 1994. But later I had trouble convincing anyone that it had any theoretical relevance. As a theoretical physicist, I had trouble myself justifying the factor knowing intuitively space has no intrinsic attributes other than dimensionality. The reason we may be able to discard the concept theoretically is because of the revised framework outlined above, as a relativistic beam of particles, or antiparticles, or spaceship or celestial body, is accelerated, it will generate asymptotically a field of retardants, accelerons. This asymptotic generation of temporal field bosons may have intrinsic limiting factors that equate to, say, the speed of light. In this way, we dispense of the infamous impedance of free space that theoretical physicists love to ignore. So, if this revised framework is correct, the impedance of space can be discarded theoretically. The elasticity of time, as I had devoted so much to, can similarly be discarded, and the elaston can be replaced by the temporal field boson, the accelerant with implicit orthogonal boson, the retardant. Even the notion of convex space, or any deformation of space, can be discarded. They become obfuscations rather than heuristic pedagogical instruments. So the leap of faith, in truth, is not really a leap of faith, it's a cosmic house cleaning of outdated theoretical anachronisms. SGM, the 14th of October 2021.